Welcome to the Abundant Accountant Podcast. This is where accounting professionals just like you come to learn the most efficient and powerful ways to grow their firm, sharpen their sales skills, and have consistent increasing revenue. We cover topics from sales, networking, handling objections, negotiation, pricing, finding those ideal clients, and how to get rid of the ones that just don't suit you and how to set those boundaries so you can stop giving away your time, working for free, putting yourself on sale, and really start to get paid for the value and the worth that you bring to your clients. You'll learn tips, strategies, as well as hear others from personal interviews from successful accounting professionals. This podcast will show you exactly how to create the firm and life of your dreams full of abundance. Welcome to the Abundant Accountant Podcast. Today we have a very special guest. Our special guest is the co-founder and president of the American Institute of Certified Tax Planners. As the driving force and visionary behind the San Diego-based non-for-profit, our special guest has set out to change the way tax professionals approach tax planning. Realizing that many tax professionals were missing government tax breaks that could save their clients millions of dollars, she created an elite network of tax professionals, including CPAs, EAs, and tax attorneys, who are all trained to help their clients proactively plan and implement tax strategies that rescue thousands of dollars in wasted tax. But before we welcome our special guest to the show, can you imagine being able to increase your base fees by over 300% or even double your revenue this year? Or what about collect 100% of the AR that maybe isn't collected yet and get paid 100% upfront and spend as much time with your family as you want and even take vacations during the next tax season? These are just some of the results that the accounting, tax, and bookkeeping firm owners that I work with have been able to accomplish, and they all started by watching my free training. I will show you the 4 shifts to charge higher fees, double your firm revenue without having to work harder or add on any new clients so that you can end the resentment and end the 14-hour day grinds and get the excitement back that you had for your firm when you first started it. So sign up right now at theabundantaccountant.com/masterclass. Once again, that's theabundantaccountant.com/masterclass. Now let's welcome our very special guest, Dominique Molina, to the show. Welcome, Dominique, to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Michelle. It's always fun to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for being here with us today again. And for those of you that don't know Dominique Molina, Dominique, why don't you just share who you are, what you do? And for the EAs and CPAs out there, make sure to keep your ears perked because this one's really for you.
So my name's Dominique Molina. I'm a CPA. I have a master's in tax law, and I'm also a certified tax strategist. And I lead the American Institute of Certified Tax Planners. And we're an association and licensing program for CPAs, enrolled agents, and attorneys who want to focus on tax reduction in their practice. So we're an education program to give you all of those details on how to do it and how to do it right.
Yes, awesome. Well, here at the Abundant Account, we've worked with many certified tax coaches and strategists and really being able to convert higher tax plans and effectively help your clients at a higher level. And so you can get paid a lot more and not have to work so much. So Dominique's program is amazing. If you're an EA or a CPA, you should check it out. But today we're going to be talking about, the risk of giving away free advice to your clients. I think, Dominique, a lot of accounting, bookkeeping firm owners, tax firm owners get stuck in this rut because we want to help everyone. We're people pleasers. And yet we give away free advice thinking that it's a good thing, where in reality, it hurts us in so many different ways. And there's so much liability that I know you're going to share today. So I'm very excited for this conversation because I think if you take notes today and you really think about what we're talking about, it will not only prevent you from not having more money in your bank account, but it will help you help more people in the end, Because sometimes when we give away free advice, we think we're helping people, but Dominique, in reality, we're not, right?
Right. I think a lot of times we have different motivations, as you said, Michelle, for why we want to do it. We want to help people. We're just plain old busy, and sometimes it's just easier to blab out some advice and get it off of our to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
And we also want to demonstrate that we know what we're talking about, right?
Right.
Our goal is to try to build up trust and confidence with either that prospective client or an existing client. And so we have different motives for what we're trying to do with giving away things for free. When it comes to trying to prove that we know something, it actually can have the opposite effect. And here's why. When you give away what seems like a solution, and you have to keep in mind, we have to always take the perspective from our client's point of view. We have to take their perspective. So sitting in their shoes, they don't really understand most of what we do. And so if we blab out a solution such as Augusta rule or hire your kids or home office, they don't understand the depth and the nuance that is there. And they certainly don't understand what's required to implement that. So here's where the problem creeps in. The problem creeps in is that you say home office or you say become an S Corp. And in their mind, the problem is now solved. So in their mind, there really isn't an issue that needs work to be done. Right. So in effect, when you're giving away that advice, it feels to them like you're already done with the solution. And what we're intending is to highlight that there's a problem, right?
Right. And I think, like you said, I mean, I don't even know what Augusta rule means, but let's just call it that. If the client believes that now their problem is solved, then they think that's it. There's nothing else I need to engage your firm with. There's nothing else. I've got it figured out. But yet there might be so many different layers to this rule and calculations that need to be made or other resources you need to hire in order to implement that piece of a plan. And when we give away the answer from a sales perspective, it's actually hurting you because now you can't have an annual engagement because they think it's a one and done. You just solved my problem. I'm good to go. Where in reality, this might be something, and maybe you can share a little bit on it, like really what's involved on that advice. And what are the implementations that are required to make that happen for the taxpayer, and how that client should probably need your hand, you need to hold their hand for more than just, here's your answer, goodbye, that's it.
Right. And I almost think of this too. We find ourselves often under duress when we give these answers, right? Because it comes in as a so-called quick question. I think you have a button that says no more quick questions, right, Michelle?
Yeah. Well, no, my button says I will bill you and charge you for all of the questions because there is no such thing as a quick question. Absolutely. And in your world too, there's no such thing as an emergency. And I know a lot of you get, whatever your name is, Dominique, I just have a really quick question. This is an emergency. It'll take 5 minutes. And you're like, there's no answer that would take 5 minutes in the world of what you guys do. It's impossible.
And we don't often have all of the necessary information to really conclude anything. And so I think, again, I don't know that our intention really is to give them a final piece of advice, but we often find ourselves doing that to accomplish something else. And again, it really backfires because now what you've got is a client that thinks it's done. So then if you say, hey, I'd like to engage with you to do a tax plan, in their mind, it's done. They don't really need anything because you just gave them everything they need to know.
Yeah, and I think, and also it's not a way to prove that you know something when we just blurt out the strategy that you want to use, even though underneath the strategy, There's 10 different layers below that. And when we do that, we're also putting ourselves in a position to lose credibility.
Yes, it does undermine our credibility.
It
And
does.
here's how. Because it's a little unrealistic. Think about this, especially with our prospective clients. How would you know? You just met them. So how would you know what the ideal solution is for them? How would you know when maybe you're just looking at last year's tax return, what all they have going on and the nuance and the depth of their business or their personal lives?
Yeah.
So if I come across that, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to form an S corporation for you. That's also a little bit unrealistic that you would have that defined of an answer without either doing more work or knowing more about them. And so, again, this is more of an unconscious thing that's happening psychologically between us and our client / prospective client. But it does backfire. It actually undermines your credibility.
Yeah.
So then, Michelle, the question comes back then, well, if I'm not going to give away advice to demonstrate that I know something, how do I prove that I know what I'm talking about? I think you have a solution for this, don't you?
I do, but I want to hear what you've got to say because, this is how do we stop ourselves in our track of not giving away free advice? Because in reality, you think you're giving away this free advice, but then you're undermining your credibility. Your prospective client thinks you just solved their problem. Now they don't need you. So now you can't help them because in their mind, they're good to go.
Right.
So it's a lose-lose-lose situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think it is, Dominique?
Well, so what I was going to say is, with all of your knowledge, the areas to look at and the questions to ask. And it's amazing, really, if you sit down with a file and you just think of all of the questions you have about it. It could be, why doesn't this K1 match what the 1120S says? It could be, gosh, I see that they had a loss last year, but I don't see where this carries forward into the current year. All of those questions are excellent opportunities to open dialogue. Now, will the client know the answers to those technical questions?
Probably not.
Probably not. But do you see how in that process you are demonstrating that you know what you're talking about? And that does a lot more to build rapport, build trust and confidence than you ever could just always having the answer.
Yeah. And I think it builds curiosity to the prospect, the client sitting in front of you. It's not like, oh, they just came out and blurted out this, maybe, the Augusta, whatever is the actual answer. But by asking really good questions that has them say, oh, I've never been asked that before by another firm. Oh,
Yes.
That's another really good question, Dominique. I've never heard of that before. How come my last firm or my last CPA has never asked me any of these questions? And then you now look like the superhero.
Yes.
You are now showing your knowledge without anything except asking really smart questions where that can build not like only what you said, the know, like, and trust factor, but it builds the credibility instead of has you lose the credibility.
Yes.
Because the other way is actually a credibility loss. By asking great questions and not saying, hey, here's the answer, even though it might still be the answer, it shows that you're getting to know them, but you're also talking about things that are very intelligent, very unique, very different, that no other firm owner has ever asked because they're too busy running around with their head cut off.
Yes.
They're inundated with work. They have way too many clients. They're working 12, 15-hour days. They're going meeting to meeting to meeting. They can barely eat lunch. And when you can slow down and ask these types of questions, like you said, it builds that rapport too.
Yeah. And I think you said it, and I'm just going to be a little more direct to
Okay.
sum up what you said. And that is, you're demonstrating the difference. They are experiencing that you're different. And
Correct.
that's really important with value pricing. If you're going to come in and charge 10 times what the so-called going rate is for something, you have to create this perception that they are convinced they cannot get this level of service someplace else.
Yeah.
And that starts from the minute that you meet somebody. They have that experience has to be different.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
let's throw in a third thing
Okay.
here in the conversation about why you don't want to give away free advice. And that's because you're actually assuming so much liability,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody would get out of bed if they really thought about how much liability they're taking on with this process. And so I want to talk a little bit
Well,
about.
let's hear it. I mean, have you had any of, a firm owner who you've taught all of this stuff to where they gave away free advice and they risked their liability so much that they actually got into trouble? Like a story, a great
Well,
example would be fantastic.
I'll tell you,
Okay.
Michelle, that I'm scheduled in 2 weeks to fly across the country to testify in a trial against a planner, specifically with the Augusta rule. So that's top of mind.
Yeah.
That's why I just slipped that in there. This wasn't a setup, I swear. But yes, we take on so much liability. And this stems from the Circular 230 rules that we all must adhere to as practitioners. And there were some recent revisions to that. In 2014, the government relax some of the rules. What I'm speaking of specifically is Section 10.35, which has to deal with tax advice and what our responsibilities are as a practitioner before the IRS when it comes to tax advice to our clients. And these rules are designed to increase the quality of the tax advice that people receive. And so what happens is, you've probably seen those disclaimers at the bottoms of emails, Michelle.
Yep.
If you've been emailing with tax practitioners, it basically says, hey, you can't rely on anything here for advice. And that actually, the government determined that disclaimer was way overused, doesn't have effect. And so they did away with that. And so that opt-out language is eliminated from Circular 230 now. But the revision doesn't eliminate all of our standards for tax advice. And so that's what I thought was important today to talk about as well, because I know that most practitioners don't think about this when they're rattling off the answer to a so-called quick question. Do you realize that you are actually creating liability for yourself in the event that somebody either A, implements your advice wrong, B, misinterprets the advice that you're giving and has consequences, or C, maybe you've inadvertently even given some incorrect advice simply because you don't have all the information you need to give an accurate piece of advice at that time. Wow. And so it's really profound, and it's actually scary. So I encourage everybody listening to this to actually go in and read Section 10.37, which talks about all of the things that are covered when we're talking about advice. We have to base our advice on reasonable, factual, and legal assumptions. We have to reasonably consider all relevant facts. All relevant facts. Well, how do we do that if we don't have enough information in that moment? We have to use reasonable efforts to identify and ascertain facts relevant to the advice. And we have to relate applicable law and authorities to those facts. So this is huge. It's huge. And I know that the IRS is understaffed and they probably aren't enforcing as much as they possibly could because there's so much volume there. But you never want to end up on the unlucky side of that because somebody has misinterpreted your advice, that game of telephone, by the time
gets
they
around
come
to the
back
end
and say, I heard Michelle told me I could do the Augusta rule, and that means I could rent my house and my relatives are going to move in, and that's all a tax write-off. By the time they hear it, it's all twisted. And what do you have left to protect yourself? You actually have nothing. It's your word against their word.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Dominique, let's say you were to meet with a prospect and, for those listening, you might want to take some notes because I'm sure Dominique's going to have something really good to say. And a client calls you now with all of the stuff that she just listed with the liability. How would you respond to a prospect that says, hey, I just have a quick question. I've got this scenario. What do you think? And in our minds, we used to just blurt out what you thought. But now, now you really need to slow down. Think about maybe put a sticky note on your computer and just put liability. But what's a good way to say something to a prospect in order to get them into a meeting with you? So then you can really start to demonstrate the difference on why you're unique and different than other firm owners by asking great questions like the ones you shared earlier, which I don't remember what you said, but it builds the rapport, it builds the credibility in the right way. What's a way that you could explain it to the prospect where they don't feel totally like off put and you can feel good about it?
Well, this is the time, Michelle. This is the time to pull out the go-to response that every attorney and accountant has in their back pocket. This is the time to say, that's a great question. And it depends.
It depends.
The answer depends, right? It depends on a number of factors. And while I won't be able to give you an answer in this call, or while I won't be able to answer this in an email, I'd be happy to explore that for you. I'm going to need some additional information. We can set up an appointment. Now, if it's an existing client and you're working with them on a year-round bundled service agreement or a subscription agreement, you can say, that's a great question for our next meeting. I will be prepared for that, and I'll get back to you with additional information that I might need. And if it's a prospective client, depending on what your process is for handling incoming prospects, follow that script that you use. If you offer a complimentary consultation, if you're a planner and you use a discovery session, something like that as a mechanism for selling your services, that's how you handle that. And it puts distance between you and the question, number one, so you don't feel on the spot. Because that's the other thing, right? It's like you've got a lot of things swimming around in your brain, and then all of a sudden the record scratches and stops, and you're trying to come up with an answer on the fly, and it's not. Again, you're under duress, right?
Yeah. Well, it's your natural default, right? It's the natural way that so many firm owners have been operating under chaos, literally. And we think we have to answer everything right away. We don't want to add another thing to our to-do list. We're already overworked. Some of us feel underpaid. Some of us feel just completely in overwhelm. And when you're coming from that place, we just want to blurt out things. But it's like, how do you make the liability of the law the number one deterrent for you to slow down?
Yeah. So here's my response to that. And my advice behind this is, you have to be able to protect yourself whenever you're giving tax advice. And the way that you do that is by putting things in writing.
Yep.
Now, we just lost half of the listeners, Michelle. They just turned the station because they don't want to do that. And they're going, come on, I don't have time to write all this down. And it's true.
Yeah.
You don't. And so to me, that's the ultimate deterrent. Is that if I know I have to be able to put that in writing, number one, so I can protect myself, so that I can prove that I disclosed everything that needs to be disclosed about that advice that I'm rendering, and so that I can prove that I said what I said I said.
Yeah.
And that takes time. And to me, if something's going to take me writing it down, then I have to get paid, and I have to get paid really well for that, so that I
Totally.
can be really thorough in my answer. I can provide research if I need to, citations, and ultimately that's going to be best for me. And so we have to protect our livelihoods. These people that we work with, that's not their concern.
It's not.
No one's going to
But
step up for you.
now you're going to be, testifying in a couple weeks, and I'm sure this person didn't realize that was an implication of what could possibly happen for them.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Right.
That's not a fun place to be. Well, Dominique, thank you for
But we can all learn from that.
We can. Yeah. I mean, mine as well. Don't reinvent the wheel on this. That's what we're trying to say. Are there any other risks of giving away free tax advice to current clients, prospects, without going through the proper channels and getting more information and having proper meetings instead of blurting out answers, or, like you have shared in the past, creating a Band-Aid effect, which clearly won't solve anyone's problem?
Yeah, I think the possibility of just giving wrong advice, and again, it comes down to, usually we don't have enough information to know for sure that that's ideal for someone. The other thing is, if you think about it from an advisory standpoint, the work we're doing in advisory services is we're analyzing, we're looking at all the possible solutions to a problem, and we're analyzing to determine what's optimal. And so if you just respond and you give an answer to a question, where's the analysis in that?
Yeah, there is no analysis.
No, it's like that concept when you're in school. It drove me crazy in grade school, because I would always get a markdown grade with the note, show your work.
Yeah, show your work.
Show your work. I know you got the answer right, but you did it in your head, right? And so we have to be able to show our work, and we can't do that by just thinking through something on the fly in our brain.
Yeah.
So we want to protect ourselves. We want to protect our clients from getting bad advice. And ultimately, we want to build that trust and confidence. And I think all of that comes down to not giving away free advice.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when we don't give away free advice from the sales side of things, you'll have many more clients. When you have more clients, that means that you'll have more revenue. And when you charge 10 times the amount and have this great, unique experience, you'll not have to have many clients. So the volume will decrease, the revenue will increase, because when we blurt out these answers and you think the client now the client thinks you've solved their problem, then they don't need you. We have to have it where not only do they have trust and confidence, and you're protecting yourself and you're protecting your client, but you're doing the right thing. And not giving this advice is doing the right thing. And those are all the risks at hand. So I think it's better to not do any of it. Is there anything else, Dominique, that you'd like to share today about,
No, I think now that everybody's terrified and they don't want to go to work today after listening to this.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's a good thing. I mean, we weren't here to terrify you, but we're here to increase your revenue and increase your bank accounts and have you work with less clients and really enjoy the work that you do and slow down. And I think that putting these things into practice and going and reading, what was it? Section 1037, I think you said.
Yeah. So it's Circular 230.
Right.
And specifically the parts that we talked about today are 1030 or part 10.35 and 10.37.
Got it.
And, there's a lot of gobbledygook there, but ultimately it does really clarify what we're required to do. And hopefully that will lead to us giving things away for free less. Yes. So you all now have permission to protect yourself first. It's okay.
Yes, it is okay.
And even a response to your client, if they're really pressuring you, I need an answer now, or why won't you just tell me the answer? because I have to protect myself and to protect my license, I'm required by law to follow requirements.
Yeah, I love that.
And so I'm going to put some time into this, and I'll create a written response for you that you can rely on.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. And I think, like Dominique said, she has just given you permission to keep your mouth shut. So with that, thank you so much for being here with us today on the Abundant Accountant podcast. It's always an honor to have you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining Dominique and I today on another amazing episode of the Abundant Accountant podcast. So much goodness in that. You might want to rewind and take copious notes and listen to it again, because the risk of giving away free tax advice is not going to jail. And I was talking to her after we ended the show, and I was like, we need to do a part 2 after you get back from testifying on the East Coast, because this guy is up against, he has like 20 counts against him from different clients, dating back like 11 years. So I'm very curious on how that ends up, but I don't want that to happen for you. And giving away free advice, it can seem like the solution is perfect. However, it's not. It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do the client any good. And it doesn't bring you in more revenue, and it doesn't help you gain more clients so you can help them. So imagine being able to attract and convert more clients, double your revenue, get paid up front, get paid for even discovery meetings if that's what you want to do, but ultimately spend more time with your family. Those are some of the results that the firm owners that we work with have been able to accomplish. And they all started by watching one of my free trainings at theabundantaccountant.com/masterclass. And in this training, I will show you the 4 shifts to charge higher fees, double your firm revenue, not work harder, not take on any new clients, especially if you have a lot of clients. We'll taper it down. So you can end the resentment. You can end giving away free advice. You can end the 14-hour day grinds. And you can get the excitement and love back that you had for your firm when you first started it. So remember to sign up at theabundantaccountant.com/masterclass. I look forward to seeing you there, and I look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Have a great day.